Welcome to Will's Personal Development Podcast, where we bring you data and science-backed answers and advice from billionaires. What's up, everyone? My name is Will, and welcome to my podcast. So today we will be giving you the most powerful tip I have learned from reading a self-help book. So the most powerful tip that I have learned from reading a self-help book, that's a really tough question, because if you have been following any of my podcast episodes or you've been reading my blog, you know that I read a lot and I have consumed a lot of self-help content. And you know, if you're listening, I'm assuming that you have some faith in self-help. But if you don't, trust me, this isn't really woo-woo, mushy-gushy spiritual stuff. When you hear the stuff that I give out, it's usually very practical and really science-backed. I think the great thing about self-help in the recent years is that a lot of it, at least the books I read, there's a lot of science and rigorous testing and statistics behind it. So it's not just like, oh, you should do this. The books that I really respect are the ones that have a lot of data and evidence to back it up. So, for example, one thing would be habits. Habit formation has a lot of science to test it out now. It's not just, oh, you should do this because I think it will help you improve your bad habits and turn them into great ones. So now, without further ado, let's just get into what it is. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of a cop-out by giving you more than one tip. Now, I will emphasize the most powerful tip, which is subjective, because it's kind of like saying, what's your favorite song to a musician? Because there's so many genres and types of songs. However, you know, a lot of you just want the 1-2 punch. So I'll start off with what I think is probably if not one of the most powerful lessons I have learned from reading self-help books. And that one is it's lifelong learning. And to give you an analogy why this is the most powerful tip is because it's kind of akin to getting one wish from a genie. The best wish that you can ask that genie is for more wishes. And so lifelong learning is kind of like that, judo move where you get more wishes out of it. And so, you know, if you ever rub a magic genie's lamp and it grants you any wish that you can think of, or if you like Dragon Ball Z, you do the same thing with the dragon. The smartest move would be to ask for more wishes, which is not what a lot of people do, which is why I think it's really important. Now, let's dive into what lifelong learning is to explain why I think it's a very powerful technique. So, lifelong learning, in simple terms, is just realizing that you can get ahead by learning new skills and techniques and insights and mindset shifts, whatever, from people with decades of experience, which cuts your learning curve tremendously. If you try and learn everything on your own, then you're not really progressing. Human civilization has progressed over many, many years because we've learned from the mistakes of our past, or at least we try to. In fact, what you'll see is that the majority of people don't do this. They're too lazy to read history. They don't understand why we record history, and therefore history repeats or rhymes. And the stock market's a great example of this. Most people fall for the same exact stock market crash type situations when you look at every decade of history. The same thing that happened in 1929 with the Great Depression and stock market crash. Similar trends have occurred in like the 80s. And similar forms of euphoria have occurred as well. So there was something that happened in, I think, the 1700s or 1800s called like the Great poppy flower bubble. And basically what happened was people started getting very, very euphoric and insane about a commodity, which was the poppy flower. So what happened was this flower, which was kind of rare, but still, a flower. It wasn't like that great. They got so into this that gradually over the span of a couple years, everyone got exceptionally hyped up on how rare this flower was, so that it went from maybe a few dollars in cost to being worth more than an entire house. People were literally selling their houses to get their hands on a flower, which was kind of stupid because the flower could decay and it would be worthless. And, it got too crazy. And so what you'll see is that if you look at history, which most people don't, the same trend kind of plays out. So most people don't really study the lessons from the past. They don't really respect or learn from people with decades of experience that came before them. So in your life, maybe you have a specific skill that makes you money. Maybe it's managing other people. Maybe it's plumbing. Maybe it's computer programming. Whatever that skill is, maybe it's writing. There are people who have had 50 plus years of experience and have made millions of dollars doing what they do. In fact, I'm reading a book right now by Stephen King, who has made tens of millions of dollars writing and wrote a book teaching others how to write called On Writing. And yet most people, sometimes it's out of arrogance, sometimes it's out of just, they think that they can do it uniquely or differently and they can just like forge their own path, but they refuse or choose not to. Sometimes it's out of ignorance. They choose not to learn from experienced people that came before them. And what they miss out on is they miss out on all these unique lessons that these people stumbled into. And sometimes it costs them years of time and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you'll see this quite often, in fact. For example, I was reading Ray Kroc's book. Ray Kroc is the guy who pretty much built McDonald's from one store to the multi-billion-dollar global industry it is today. Ray Kroc, he wrote a book called Grinding It Out. And in the book, he has this whole session where he talks about his mistakes in real estate. Most people think of McDonald's as a burger joint, but it is actually one of the largest real estate fast food locations in the world, because it's one of the few restaurants that actually buys and owns the land that it sells its burgers on. But I'm digressing. The point is that basically he admitted that he made a lot of real estate decisions that screwed him up, cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars because he didn't read the contracts right and he forgot to factor in certain things. And basically he got taken to the cleaners and pretty much exploited by the contract owners. Even the McDonald's brothers kind of took him in for the ringer by making the entire contract that they signed in their advantage. The McDonald's brothers are the people who had the first burger joint. And Ray Kroc was really the guy who convinced the McDonald's brothers that, hey, this has great potential. I will franchise this whole thing and do all the work, and you just keep running your one little restaurant here, but you will get most of the money. And so he kind of did that deal, and of course the McDonald's brothers made a killing and took a lot of Ray Kroc's money until, Ray Kroc recovered and bought out the McDonald's brothers, which took decades, but that's kind of what happened. Again, if you want more details, read his book, Grinding It Out. So as you can see, if you were to start a franchise or company like McDonald's, you could learn a lot in terms of real estate and the mistakes that are made by doing so. And it's the simple things that get you, because I think most people, maybe they think they're smarter, or sometimes it's just out of ignorance. They don't know how important this is, but they think, oh, I don't need to read that, or, oh, my situation's different. I think that's a huge one. They think their situation's unique or different. And what ends up happening is it's not, or it's very similar, which what ends up happening is they end up repeating the same exact problems and failures and mistakes that they could have avoided by just reading a book or watching a video interview or whatever else. And it's a very similar real estate mistake that would have cost them many years and many dollars. And I think the biggest issue is the cost of years, because money is not really a issue. Like if you screw up and lose money, if you have infinite life, you can make that money back eventually. But the one thing, the one criteria or metric that we're capped at is the amount of life we have to live. We only have a certain amount of time on this earth. So and I'll see this with a lot of top performers. The one metric that all top performers will try to maximize out on is the return on their time on this earth, because it's the one resource that they're really limited at. And so, for example, there's this venture capitalist entrepreneur. His name's Tucker Max, and he says that he will spend anything he can to, save time. If that means, spending $100 or $200 on some machine that washes the dishes faster or cuts his grass for him or gets him to work 5 minutes earlier, he has no price caps on that, because he knows it's the most important resource he has. Again, Mark Cuban, he's said the same thing on the show he's on, Shark Tank. Mark Cuban's a billionaire, for those of you who don't know. And he says, the only thing I care about is return on time, not return on capital or whatever else. So I think it's an interesting concept. Again, it has its limits as well, because, you still have to look at other metrics as well. But nonetheless, I think it's really important. And therefore, most people fail with lifelong learning because they stop learning when they graduate college, because they think, oh, for all my life, I've been forced to learn by my parents and I've been forced to go to school. And now that I'm out of school, I don't have to learn anymore, so I'm not going to. So then after school, they go to job every single day. They don't learn a single thing. They just do the work that they're told every single day, day in and day out. Now compare that to the person like me or like you who continues to learn every single day for the rest of their life, even after they graduate college. Now, for the first several years, there may not be much of a difference. But when that person hits 40 years of age, 50 years of age, 70 years of age, 80 years of age, there's a tremendous gulf of difference in terms of the knowledge and skill sets of that person. The person with all that years of experience, let's say I read a book, maybe one book per 2 weeks. Over a course of a lifetime, I've read maybe that can grow to hundreds, maybe 500 books over my lifetime. Compare that to the guy who's just doing nothing. That's a huge gulf of difference. And I learned that this whole concept of lifelong learning from two big sources. One, of course, would be Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. Those are two billionaires who emphasize it a lot in their interviews and speeches and so forth. And then the second thing would be Sir John Templeton. He's another very successful investor. He was very close to the billionaire mark, but he stopped because he wanted to devote the rest of his life, the second half of his life, to charity work. But he wrote a book on success and happiness with that title. It was called 21 Secrets to Success and Happiness. And one of his points was that fact, with that specific analogy I just gave you on the guy who stops learning after graduating versus the guy who doesn't. Now, I just want to share with you one bonus tip because I think, it's very tough to just give you one most powerful tip from what I've read from self-help, because it's kind of like, it's like a chair with just one leg. It's kind of like saying, giving you one tip on how to create six-pack abs. It's not enough. It's that on its own is not going to get you going. So with that tip, I think it's important to kind of steer you in the right direction on what books to read or what to learn from. And I think the next big thing would be, I really suggest you read Laws of Success by Napoleon Hill, because he really goes into all these details on how you can really start to make more money, earn more money. And so the biggest thing I learned from the book, I think there's a lot more that you can learn from the book, which is why I recommend you really read it. But if I had to give you one of the most powerful tips I learned from reading Napoleon Hill's book on earning money, it would be the power of the subconscious. Now, again, some people will be like, oh, that's woo-woo spiritual crap. And there are people who have kind of stretched this concept and made it kind of BS. And there's an extreme version of the law of attraction crowd who kind of do this. And they basically say like, oh, you can sit on your butt, do no work, and then just like, use the law of attraction and just will the universe to send you money. Now that's BS, because it's predicated on a foundation of laziness, no hard work, no actual initiative or goals. But what I'm talking about here is actually having goals and so forth, but understanding the science, the evolutionary biology and circuitry of your brain, and realizing that the subconscious is an actual part of your brain that works, and that a lot of top successful people use it on a very practical, measurable level to succeed. For example, if you study a lot of great writers like Stephen King or Ernest Hemingway especially, he uses his subconscious for creativity. So what he'll do when he really has, he's dwelling on a story to tell, he can't really brainstorm ideas. He'll give it up to his subconscious, not think about it for a day or up to a week, and then let his subconscious just in the background kind of like work on it, and then he'll come back to it and it'll be there. Now, if you look this up on YouTube, you'll see this. Michael Jackson uses this as well. Michael Jackson, one of the greatest musicians ever, he has this video interview. It's like the one interview he did with, I think it was CNN late in his career. It was like a documentary. He says, you kind of just have to let the music write itself. And then he goes into the process of how he wrote Billie Jean's bass line. And it was, he said he had a very specific goal. I want a very mean bass line. But he sat at the piano and couldn't do it. And he said, what I do is, I just kind of let it go. And I just, leave it in the air, and I stopped thinking about it. And then a couple days later, I was sitting in the car, and then the bass line came. And he didn't know where it came from. I'm guessing it was his subconscious and the car engine that was, that kind of sparked his creativity and created that bass line. And that is another example. I could give you 100 others. But again, Napoleon Hill's book goes into more detail on how you can use this, but the basic idea is to really, have a specific definitive goal, write it out in detail, have a deadline, give a specific value proposition that you will give in exchange for that goal. So if you want to make a specific amount, $100,000, what value will you give in exchange? Maybe it's plumbing services. Maybe it's music services. Go into detail and then give emotion and energy and enthusiasm to it, and then let your subconscious work on it. If you don't have a specific how to get there yet, just let your subconscious work on it while you're taking a break. And then come back to it in like a day or a week and see if it's helped a lot. So, of course, there's a lot more studies behind this that I can go into. There's actually a great book by Malcolm Gladwell that cites a great study on this. The book's called Blink. And the long story short of the study is that most people don't realize that it is their that someone else sparked their idea. They think it came from themselves. They take credit for it themselves, and they did this whole experiment to prove it. And basically, they had people like really brainstorm over this problem, and then they had when they're deep in that concentration phase, they had a scientist accidentally on purpose come in and give a very clear hint on the answer. And then when they asked these people afterwards how they came up with the answer, like 99% of them were like, I don't know. I think I came up with it myself. So I just think it's a really interesting study. And I think what's really happening here is when you let your subconscious, which I call like, I would give it a kin analogy to background programming. It's a rough analogy, but it kind of works. So I would call the subconscious kind of like a background program you're running on your computer. But if you give your background programming, your subconscious, that time, it will use your environment and pick up on all these things that you didn't notice before and use that as creativity to spark new ideas and ways of manifesting your dreams. So it's not woo-woo BS. It's kind of just like making your mind more active and aware of opportunities. Maybe you want to become an actor in Hollywood, but you see all these opportunities that you miss because you don't see them as opportunities. Maybe it's that girl who you ordered Chipotle from at the store. Maybe she has a connection, but you don't see this until you really, program your subconscious to be open to every possible opportunity that passes your way. So again, this podcast does a disservice. I highly recommend you read Laws of Success by Napoleon Hill for more details. That's it. And I highly encourage you to subscribe to this podcast and give me some feedback on willyoulaugh.com. And of course, I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to Will's Personal Development Podcast. You can find more at willyoulaugh.com.